After just 2 weeks of Donald Trump's presidential campaign, NBC finally had enough and issued this statement today. Due to the recent derogatory statements by Donald Trump regarding immigrants, NBC Universal is ending its business relationship with Mr. Trump. Here is candidate Trump's reaction today.
They wanted me to do The Apprentice, and now with my statements on immigration, which happen to be correct, they are going to take a different stance, and that's okay. I mean, whatever they want to do is okay with me. I've had a lot of great relationship with NBC. I think as far as ending the relationship, I have to do that because my view on immigration is much different than the people at NBC.
NBC's statement today said, the annual Miss USA and Miss Universe pageants, which are part of a joint venture between NBC and Trump, will no longer air on NBC. In addition, as Mr. Trump has already indicated, he will not be participating in The Apprentice on NBC. Celebrity Apprentice is licensed from Mark Burnett's United Artists Media Group, and that relationship will continue. MSNBC is, as is obvious, owned by NBC Universal. And a new Fox News national poll shows that Donald Trump is actually in second place among Republican voters. And the most recent New Hampshire poll shows him in second place in that state, the one where the first in the nation primary election will be held. Joining us now, Joy Reid, an MSNBC national correspondent, Cynthia Littleton, the managing editor for TV at Variety, and Maria Teresa Kumar, president of Voto Latino and host of Changing America on Shift by MSNBC. Cynthia, this is, first of all, a show business story. It turns out that Trump actually has no ownership position whatsoever in the whole Celebrity Apprentice thing, which is why if they can find somebody to host that thing, Mark Burnett can keep it going. And that's an interesting reveal, that all he was on Apprentice was a paid actor, nothing but a salaried paid actor, and he's canceled off of that, and the other shows are gone too.
Undoubtedly, he had a profit participation stake?
He had no profit participation. We found this out today. We asked Burnett and NBC, no profit participation whatsoever. He was just a hired actor by Mark Burnett at the start of that show.
Mm-hmm. That is an interesting reveal.
Yeah, and so the cancellation of the beauty pageants, these were low-rated summer things where they throw it in instead of a rerun of The Blacklist and see what it can do, and so now they're going to live without that at NBC.
Yeah, that is not a big loss for NBC, canceling that show. It's a much bigger loss for the pageant itself. Inside of 3 days, they lost NBC, their English language outlet, and a few days earlier, they lost Univision, their Spanish language outlet. So they must be scrambling right now.
And of course, Joy Reid, Donald Trump threatened suing, which is what he does anytime you don't actually compliment him.
Yeah.
It's like anything short of that. Let me show you my 4-year-old threat from Donald Trump. Of course, he issued his lawsuit threat to me via Twitter. I think we have it. It said, I heard his show is unwatchable, that Lawrence has made many false statements last night about me. Maybe I should sue him. He's still thinking about that, Joy Reid, because what he does is he threatens to sue every day, several times a day, and, you know, once a year or so he sues somebody.
Yeah, and then he also says, well, actually, I dumped them. So that's like the two-part Donald Trump dance is, no, they didn't dump me, I dumped them. And by the way, I'm going to sue them for not dumping me because I dumped them. I think the other sort of hilarious thing that we've seen here is Donald Trump, presidential candidate, if he was going to also be Donald Trump actor on The Apprentice, was going to have to choose, right? You can't be both a presidential candidate and an employee of NBC Universal, as you pointed out the last time he ran, and this time too. So he was always going to have to choose, and he was eventually going to have to put that disclosure out that would reveal that he was a salaried employee of The Apprentice, that would reveal that maybe he's not a fulfillionaire or whatever amount of ungodly sums of wealth he claims to have. So it's just very interesting that I think what we have discovered is that Donald Trump is very good at playing Donald Trump, this character he created however many decades ago.
If you want to, you can address Donald directly because he's in the pajamas watching right now. Maria Teresa Kumar, I want to get to the serious side of this, and let's begin it by replaying what started this controversy in his campaign announcement. Let's listen to this 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Now, Maria, let's listen to what Trump said today about why there was no reason to apologize for that.
No, there's no apology because what I said is right. I mean, what I said is 100% right. There is tremendous distress on the border. As I told you, many, many people have done business with me from Mexico, and I love the Mexican people. But no apology because everything I said is 100% correct.
Maria Teresa, did you see this coming as the social media wave started to develop against Trump last week?
Not only did I see it coming, I think we're finally recognizing and we're reckoning with the Latino community. My big applause tonight is to all those individuals that wrote to NBC and Universal, signed the change.org petition, basically the organizations that came forward and saying, not on our watch. And unfortunately for Donald Trump, not only are we seeing the force of the Latino community coming together and those of our allies, but all of a sudden he has overnight 54 million people that just don't like him. And I had this conversation with some folks today from the community. They're just like, we heard those words and our heart felt heavy because we come to this country to produce, to make sure that our families have a good life, that they're safe, and at the end of the day, we just want to be able to give it a shot to work. And so it's the antithesis of what he claims that he's trying to do with The Apprentice, what he actually was carrying out. And let's not forget, Lawrence, those words that he said, those words about Mexicans being rapists, they're not that different than what we saw the Charleston shooter say before he opened fire in that church. And it's that hate rhetoric that is so important that we put a stop to. So I applaud the American people. I applaud NBC Universal and Univision for doing the right thing and saying enough is enough. There's no room for bigotry.
And Joy Reid, it is interesting that 4 years ago, Donald Trump was saying truly vicious things that he did not get him fired, and including this really intensely personal attack on Barack Obama, the student. I want to see his transcripts, and saying, you know, how did this bad student, Trump just decided he was a bad student, how did he get into Columbia? How did he get into Harvard Law School? And in that attack, that was very clearly an attack on the academic performance of every black college admission in the United States, every black law school student. How did they get there? And clearly what he was saying is they all get there through this affirmative action thing, and none of them deserve to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the African-American community, yes, there's a lot of schadenfreude. You know, everybody's sort of glad to see him go. But there is also this one little part of me that is saying, you know what, it's about time, because this is a guy who, going all the way back to the Central Park Five, was saying they should be executed. This is somebody who, when he did have an African-American win The Apprentice, couldn't be bothered to just give it to him on his own. He had to share it with someone else because he wasn't good enough to be The Apprentice on his own. And when we then get a first African-American president, but Donald Trump questions his birth, demands to see his birth certificate, says he'll give money to charity if Barack Obama will release his transcripts, disrespects the President of the United States in a way that a public figure outside of Ted Nugent doesn't typically do, does so in extremely racialized fashion. And he's been playing this game for decades and getting away with it. I'm very glad to see the company we both work for walk away from him. And all I can say is it is about time.
And, you know, Cynthia, there's this interesting thing in the FCC, interesting thing about their rule about political candidates. And I think Trump is an unanticipated element of this, where they say, if any licensee shall permit any person who is a legally qualified candidate for any public office to use a broadcasting station, he shall afford equal opportunities to all other such candidates for that office to use the broadcasting station. Now, they anticipated when they wrote it that the way a candidate would use it would be to come on there and talk about himself.
Right.
Not that he would use it by owning programming or producing programming on that network like these goofy beauty pageants. And it is entirely possible that it could have been an FCC violation for NBC to have a presidential candidate as a producer, quote, user, according to the FCC rule, of their network.
It could have triggered, having Trump continue to be involved on NBC's air in any fashion, could have triggered all kinds of headaches in terms of other candidates saying, I
want to have my beauty pageant on.
This amount of time. That could have been a lot of time. And I think that combination of that headache plus the substance of his comments were just, In the past, NBC had gotten away with it by putting out their own statement saying we distance ourselves from Donald Trump and his campaign about the birth certificate. These comments were so inflammatory that a statement from NBC Universal wasn't going to cut it.
You know, Maria Teresa, I think one of the differences that NBC knew 4 years ago that he was not going to be a presidential candidate, that on the day of their upfront announcement of their schedule, he was going to be there as a paid actor for The Apprentice. And so...
You like saying that, don't you, Lawrence?
I do.
Like a paid actor.
I know it's an offense to members of the Screen Actors Guild to think of him as an actor, but anyway... and this time it was real. This is a real candidate, and the network really had to deal with what this real candidate is out there saying.
And they actually had to take a stand, and I think that what Joanne Reed said was absolutely true. I also think that we're seeing a moment among Americans that basically saying we don't want that rhetoric anymore. We actually want to move away from the Tea Party candidacies and see real serious individuals tell us how they're going to fix America. And this was basically a stand against that and saying we are not going to allow Donald Trump to ruin the elections. And I think that's actually one of the things that the Republican Party is going to have to really figure out is like how much air are they going to give to this guy, because unfortunately he's going to bring back the force and the specter of the Tea Party that the Republicans do not want.